Hey Optimancers, Chris here. I've been releasing a series where I go over the various spell options available to druids. The druid spell list is one I often find oversimplified or underrated, so I hope to highlight some of the really great spell options available to the class. So far I've done analysis for druid cantrips and first level spells, and today I'm going over second level spell options. There are some great options here. And, there's some stinkers too, so let's sort them out. I should also note that the spells Augury, Continual Flame, and Enlarge Reduce were additional optional druid spells added in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I'm going to be looking at them as well. But if you're not using optional class features from Tasha's, then you're not going to find these spells on the druid base spell list. Just want to let you know about my Patreon. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so. There is a link in the video description. Patrons of this channel can see these videos early and non-monetized. And top-level patrons can join me for a D&D session every month. Today I want to recognize these top-level patrons: Dewey Cheatham and Howe, Don, Douglas Reynolds, Ed Iverson, Eric Harvey, Eric Wasserman, Lama Supporter 7000, I'm Not K, Jay Gemmel, and James Sprague. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. So let's go over how the rating system is going to work here. If I rank a spell as red, I think it's a bad spell, and I wouldn't recommend it for preparation on basically any druid. If I rank a spell as orange, I think it's a very circumstantial spell. This is a spell I wouldn't recommend to prepare normally, but there are situations where it will come in handy. And if we know those situations are likely to present themselves, in those cases these spells can be very effective. If I rank a spell as purple, I think the spell is okay. They're likely not the first spells I'm personally going to prepare, or at least as my primary selections, but I do think you can get reasonable value from them if you do prepare them. If I rank a spell as green, I think it's a good spell. This is the kind of spell I would consider very strongly when choosing my spell preparations. This isn't necessarily a must-have, but if you do prepare it, you're likely going to get the chance to use it, and you should get good value from it. If I rank a spell as blue, then I think it's a fantastic spell. I would have a hard time passing up the chance to prepare a blue spell. These spells are the best of the best. If you're colorblind, I'll be adding stars to the end of each rating: 1 for red, 2 for orange, 3 for purple, 4 for green, and 5 for blue, so it should be easy to discern the color ranking. And if you're just listening, no problem. I'll be announcing each rating as well. And I'm just going to go through these in alphabetical order. Our first spell is Animal Messenger. This is a one-action cast with the ritual tag, so if you have 10 minutes, you can cast it without a spell slot. I should also mention too, because a lot of people don't realize this, but if you are casting a spell that normally doesn't have concentration, but it requires more than one action to cast, then it requires concentration for the period of casting. So I should mention, for any ritual spell, if you are concentrating on another spell, you're not going to be able to cast a ritual spell, because you would have to use your concentration and you'd give up concentration on that other spell. Just something I wanted to mention. When you cast Animal Messenger, you choose a tiny beast within 30 feet to deliver a message to a recipient who you describe in a location that you've been. The beast then travels to that location and delivers the message, which can be up to 25 words, and it does so in your voice, and afterwards, the spell ends. The spell also ends if the duration expires, which is 24 hours, though you can extend the duration by up to 48 hours each time you upcast the spell. But remember that if you do cast it as a ritual, it is automatically cast at the lowest level. The distance the animal will travel in 24 hours is up to 50 miles for a flying creature, or 25 miles for other creatures. So the obvious use here is a simple communication. It's kind of like a poor man sending spell. A rat might deliver a message to an ally that you've been imprisoned, or a bird might tell your employer where they might find that item they paid you to locate, that kind of thing. There's probably a few ways to use this in ways the designers never considered. Let me give you one example. Maybe you capture a bunch of sturges in nets. So you take 12 of those sturges and you cast 12 rituals over a couple hours. Then you release them all at once to deliver a message of, "Enjoy this swarm of sturges, you creep," to someone you don't like. Once the message is delivered, spell ends, there's 12 sturges, and whoever it was you sent them to. For the most part, though, this is obviously going to be really circumstantial. But it's a ritual, which is always nice, and it's pretty low level for long-range communication. So I think it's a solid orange rating. I think in the right circumstances, it's a good spell. Second, we have Augury. This spell has a 1-minute casting time, so you're not casting it in combat. So you might as well take the extra time and cast it as a ritual and save yourself a spell slot. So Augury allows you to consult an otherworldly source regarding a course of action you're going to be taking in the next half hour. The DM lets you know if that course of action is either going to have good results, bad results, both good and bad results, or neither good or bad results. And that's it. That's the spell. Now, there is a limitation in casting here, because if you cast a spell more than once between long rests, you have a chance of getting incorrect results, which would be pretty bad. So this is likely a ritual you only want to complete once per long rest. But even with that limitation, this is pretty good. Obviously, the DM doesn't necessarily know the outcome of every possible course of action you might take, and in which case they're going to end up guessing, which isn't going to give you a lot of useful information. But you know what? They know which stairway is trapped, or where the ambush is going to take place, or where the treasure room is. So this is a way you can access, at least to some degree, some of that information. The DM also knows the intentions of the NPCs. Once again, we could use this to potentially get some of that information before, we say, confide in an NPC we're not sure about, for example. I think there is no question you will get at least some use of this spell every single adventuring day while you have it prepared. So I think a green rating is appropriate here. It's pretty good. Our next spell is Barkskin, which is a 1-action touch range casting that uses your concentration, and it lasts up to an hour. Now, while concentrating, the target's armor class cannot be less than 16, regardless of their armor. So first off, the mechanics here are uniquely weird. Let's say I normally have an armor class of 13, and I receive this spell. So now my armor class is treated as 16. So then I take partial cover. Now that would grant me +2 to my armor class. Except my base armor class is 13, +2 is 15. So according to the wording of the spell, my armor class is treated as 16, which means the cover didn't provide any benefit. But in addition to the mechanics being weird, it's really just not that good. The problem here is that armor class 16 is okay, but it's not great, and we're concentrating to get that. If we aren't a druid that uses wild shape, there is a good chance we're already armor class 16 or higher, and that's going to be true for most, or even possibly all your allies. Also, even if they have lower than a 16, it's probably not much lower. Again, 16 isn't that high in armor class. Even if we are a wild shaping druid, often we could just get a first level of mage armor and we could end up with a comparable armor class. Good chance it'd be a bit lower, but still comparable, except it would last for 8 hours and without concentration, and that's a first level spell. So there's a few things about this spell that just aren't good. Because of the wording, it's not going to stack with anything at all that boosts armor class. The armor class it provides isn't very impressive anyways, especially considering you're spending a second level slot and concentrating. I think there are cases where a moon druid might be able to get some value here, but for most druids, I think it's just a terrible spell. This is red. I generally like defensive spells, but this just doesn't provide the defense it needs to, considering the investment we're making here. The next spell is Beast Sense. This is a 1-action touch range casting that also has the ritual tag, so given the proper time, we can cast it with a spell slot. The duration is up to 1 hour, and this uses our concentration. And what you do is you touch a willing beast, and through the duration, you can use your action to see and hear what the beast sees and hears for up to the duration of the spell. During that time, you are blinded and deafened to your own surroundings, but you can switch back and forth by using your action. So the obvious thought is we could use this for scouting. But here's where I'm going to mention that now any druid can use a wild shape for a familiar that can do this without using concentration. Also, there's the whole thing that the beast here isn't necessarily under your control and you can't communicate with it. So this ends up with 3 problems. 1, I think you can effectively replicate or even in a number of cases improve upon this spell with a Find Familiar option, though admittedly you are using a resource to do that. Second, this is going to be pretty circumstantial anyways. But even when those circumstances come up, this may not be your best option. And third, this might be a spell that could work in concert with summoning, except that it requires concentration, so it doesn't. So I think this ends up ranking red, though there may be some creative uses of this I haven't considered. Next up is Continual Flame. This spell requires 1 action to cast, and we touch an object and a flame springs from it that has the brightness of a torch, so 20 foot of bright light, 20 foot of dim light. It creates no heat and cannot be quenched. The interesting thing here is it lasts until it's dispelled and with no concentration. Now, I should mention light is no big deal. I mean, light is a cantrip and it creates the same amount of light as this spell, and a lantern isn't even a spell and it's very affordable and it sheds even more light. So honestly, I can't really see preparing this at all when adventuring. But you know what? As a druid who gets this spell automatically, we don't have to select this spell. It's on our list anyway. And because of that, I could see preparing it in some downtime. You can cast it on the fighter's sword that they can unsheath, and now you have magical light without an action. It's been mentioned to me a number of times that you could cast this with a higher level spell. It technically doesn't enhance the effect, but you can still use a higher level slot to cast a spell. And a 3rd level light spell defeats a 2nd level darkness spell. There is a costly component here, 50 gold worth, that the spell consumes, so I do not think I'd be casting this with abandon, but 1 continual flame in the party cast with your highest level slot during your last downtime actually makes some reasonable sense. So I'm rating it orange, but just be aware the circumstance of the orange rating I'm referring to is not during adventuring. I'd definitely not use a preparation slot on this while I'm adventuring. But for those circumstances where you have some downtime and you want to flame up an item, then go for it. The next spell is Dark Vision. This is a 1 action touch spell that doesn't use concentration and lasts for 8 hours. Target gains Dark Vision with a range of 60 feet, and that's it. So there are a lot of cases where this just isn't needed. I mean, a lot of races have Dark Vision already. Also, not every adventure takes place in the dark. Guess what? They don't all take place in the dark. I talk to people all the time who talk like it does, but it doesn't. And even when they do, not every party is going to do the whole universal dark vision thing. In which case, someone can just have a lantern and then everyone can see 60 feet. But you know what? Sometimes you have a party that is almost entirely able to see in the dark, except for Bob over there who went very inhuman because Bob wanted to feed at level 1. So with a 2nd level spell slot, you can give Bob Dark Vision for a pretty long duration, and it's not going to use your concentration, and the entire party can wander in the darkness without a light source, which, you know, a light source can give away your location, that kind of thing. Now, do I want to spend a 2nd level slot on that when I'm a 3rd level druid? Probably not. Would I want to do it if I'm an 8th level druid? Well, in that case, yeah. I mean, a 2nd level slot isn't nearly the investment at that point. So I do think this is an orange spell. It's fine, and it's circumstantial. It's probably not something I'd consider at 3rd level, but maybe at a higher level. But again, only in the circumstances where I thought it might be needed. Our next spell is Dust Devil. This is a 1 action casting with a 60-foot range that uses concentration and lasts up to a minute. We target a 5-foot cube of air for the Dust Devil to appear, and then we can move it up to 30 feet on our turn, and that would use up our bonus action. There's 2 primary uses for the spell. The first is, if a creature ends its turn next to or within the effect, must make a saving throw or take a d8 bludgeoning damage, and it's pushed away 10 feet. The second is, if the effect moves over sand, dust, loose dirt, or gravel, creates a 10-foot radius cloud of heavy obscurement, and that's around itself, and it lasts until the start of your next turn. If we upcast the spell, the damage increases by a d8. So unfortunately, a couple things make this spell pretty bad. The first and biggest problem is the damage and pushing effect only take effect if the creature ends its turn next to the effect. So, I mean, a creature can walk right through it just fine, as long as they end their turn so they're not next to it. Then nothing happens. Even if they end their turn next to it for some reason, and honestly, I wouldn't expect that to happen very often, but things can happen. Sometimes you have limited mobility, those kinds of things. If they make their saving throw, it doesn't matter because nothing happens anyways. Now, if they fail their saving throw, you basically get the effect of a first level Thunderwave spell, except the damage is halved, and it's only affecting that one target, and you're using concentration. The Obscurement might be okay in some terrains, but don't expect to be able to use it a lot of the time, and seriously, if that's your plan, maybe just take Fog Cloud. Fog Cloud's a first level spell. It lasts longer, and it's guaranteed to work. So this spell is red, red, red. This one is normally the kind of spell I like, but having the creature's saving throw take place at the end of their turn absolutely ruins this spell. Our next spell is Earthbind. This takes 1 action to cast and has a 300-foot range, which is really, really long range. It uses your concentration and it lasts up to a minute. So you target a flying creature and it makes a strength saving throw, and if it makes the save, nothing happens. If it fails to save, its flying speed goes to 0. There's 2 reasons I don't like this spell. The first is that if the creature, which is a single creature, makes their save, nothing happens. Spells like that are an all or nothing proposition, which I think is tactically weak. I think you're just much better off with a spell that as a result you can rely on, even if it's less flashy. The second reason is the results here actually aren't flashy, because the creature, if it was flying when you cast a spell, and let's face it, that's why you're casting this spell, then they slowly and safely descend at 60 feet per round. So let's say I had a spell that knocked a flying creature prone. Then it would plummet. But this spell just has a built-in feather fall for some reason. Now, flying creatures can be a challenge for some characters, but this just isn't a reliable way to handle that. So I have to give this a red rating. Our next spell is Enhance Ability. This is a single action touch spell that uses your concentration and it lasts up to an hour. Target's going to get advantage on ability checks using the ability score you chose when you cast a spell. In addition, if you choose Constitution, they get 2d6 temporary hit points that are lost if the spell ends. And by the way, don't boost Constitution. It's not really worth it. Constitution ability checks just don't happen, and it's just not worth it for these temporaries. If you choose Strength, their carrying capacity doubles, and if you choose Dexterity, you reduce falling damage. If you upcast a spell, you can target an additional creature with the spell. So, generally speaking, this is not going to be a combat spell. I mean, I guess you could boost someone's chance to grapple or shove, or escape a grapple even, but this is a pretty expensive and inconvenient way to do that. Where I can see this being useful is out of combat. Maybe you have a spellcaster for whom it's really important to win initiative, or maybe the paladin is about to engage in a really important social interaction. Sometimes we know someone is going to be making ability checks, and those ability checks are going to be important. Now, you could use a guidance cantrip, and then you can boost 1 check. This spell boosts all of them. So this is going to be useful here and there for a number of things. And I think it ranks purple. It's not super powerful or super useful, but it's going to come in handy often enough. Our next spell is Enlarge Reduce. This requires 1 action to cast on a creature or object within 30 feet, at which point you cause that creature or object to either grow 1 size larger or shrink 1 size smaller. And this lasts for a duration of 1 minute while using your concentration. If the target's unwilling, it gets a Constitution saving throw to ignore the effect entirely. When you enlarge or reduce a creature, all the equipment it's wearing or carrying change size along with it. Now, if we enlarge something, it doubles in all dimensions and its weight is increased 8-fold. If it's a creature, it gets advantage on strength saves and ability checks, and its enlarged weapons deliver an additional 1d4 damage. If we reduce something, it halves all dimensions, and its weight is reduced to 1/8 the original. If it's a creature, it gets disadvantage on strength saves and strength ability checks, and its reduced weapons deliver 1d4 less damage. So the strength of this spell is in the versatility, but definitely not in the power level. Casting this as a debuff on an enemy could potentially draw some decent advantages, like being susceptible to grapples or shoves, and as a small damage reducer, but between the concentration and the fact this doesn't work if they make their saving throw means, in general, I would say, not worth it. As a buff on allies, This is not all that dramatic considering the concentration. A d4 extra damage is something, especially if the ally makes a lot of attacks, but you know what? It's still a pretty small boost. Advantage on strength checks might come in handy, but again, concentration is a pretty heavy price. If an ally is like a grapple build, then maybe the enemy is too large to grapple or shove prone, and maybe then this might be a worthwhile buff. But also remember we can enlarge or reduce objects. An object might be too heavy to move, but at 1/8 the weight, that might not be the case. Reducing a locked door is going to leave the majority of the doorway empty, while enlarging an obstacle might make it unpassable. I definitely enjoy a spell with versatility, and this is such a spell. Though most of the time the effects are going to be fairly minor, and it is using concentration. So I think a purple rank is about right where it belongs. Our next spell is Find Traps, one of the worst spells in the game. When you cast this spell, you sense the presence of a trap within 120 feet if it's within your line of sight at the time of casting. Things that are often considered traps in D&D, such as an area of a floor that might give way when you step on it, or that kind of thing, are not detected by this spell. Only traps that are specifically created to be harmful or undesirable are detected. But you know what the spell doesn't do? It doesn't find them. So you use a preparation slot for this spell, you spend a spell slot, because it's not a ritual spell, and then the DM tells you that you detect a trap, but you don't know where it is. And the thing is, even if this spell did what the name suggests, and it actually found the trap for you, I still don't know if it would be worth a second level slot. Because if you suspect a trap enough to cast this in the first place, there are other ways of handling that without expending the spell slots. But this spell is doubly bad because it doesn't even do that. Red rating, and you know what? Probably the worst second level spell there is on any spell list. Next up is Flame Blade. This spell is cast with a bonus action and lasts up to 10 minutes using your concentration. During that time you can use your action and you make a melee spell attack, and it does 3d6 fire damage if it hits. If we upcast a spell, this damage increases by 1d6 for every 2 levels of upcasting. And it also sheds light for 10 feet of bright and 10 feet of dim. So the light, I mean, let's be honest, it's nothing. Light sources are cheap. The problem here is the damage just isn't high enough, especially since we're using our concentration. But even if it didn't, I don't think the damage is high enough. I mean, we're talking about 11 points of damage if we hit. And frankly, that's not much better than if we just drew our scimitar and waded into melee. And we're not overly good at that either. Don't expect to be anywhere near as good in melee with this as any dedicated weapon user, even if they're not expending any expendable resource or their concentration. And the upcasting here is just terrible. We just can't get the damage anywhere near acceptable even if we use a high level slot. So this spell just doesn't deliver. It's red. I don't know the amount of damage it would need to be worth it, but it is definitely not 3d6. Next up is Flaming Sphere. This can be cast up to 60 feet away using your action, and it lasts up to 1 minute using our concentration. You create a 5-foot diameter ball of fire, and any creature that ends its turn within 5 feet of it takes 2d6 fire damage, or half that if they make their dexterity saving throw. So that alone makes it about as good as the Dust Devil spell. Fortunately, we get more here. As a bonus action on our turn, we can move the effect up to 30 feet, and if we ram a creature with the fire, we inflict the same damage and the sphere stops moving. So that alone is probably better than the Flame Blade spell, since our action is still available, at least the turn after we cast a spell. The sphere sheds light like a torch, and if we upcast it, the damage increases by a d6 per level. So it's kind of weird to me. This is the same level as Flame Blade and Dust Devil. Since it compares to both of them so favorably in terms of damage, the bonus action to do damage on your turn, with the scaling when you upcast it, I mean, why does this do an additional d6 with your bonus action for every level upcast, and Flame Blade needs 2 levels to get an additional d6? And this one's just using my bonus action to get that, and has the chance of delivering it more than once per turn, and Flame Blade doesn't. I'm not sure I get how both those spells were in the same book. Of course, I've set the bar really low here, because Flame Blade and Dust Devil are terrible spells. And although this spell is better, I still don't think it's amazing. We're using our concentration, and we get some bonus action damage. but it's not a huge amount of damage. And like with Dust Devil, don't expect creatures to take the damage from being next to it at the end of their turn very often. But the spell does deliver what it's supposed to do. You get some bonus action damage, and since it's a save for half damage, you at least get some damage every turn. With a 30-foot move, you don't suffer the same problems for movement that you do with some kinds of other similar spells. And in the end, I think this is okay. It's a purple spell, definitely not a must-have. But you know what? If you want to do a little bit of extra damage with your bonus action, this is a pretty reliable way to do that. Next spell, Gust of Wind. We cast this using our action, and for up to 1 minute using our concentration, we blow a line of wind that is 60 feet long and 10 feet wide. Now, although we can move while this spell is active, strangely we can't change the direction of the gust unless we use our bonus action to do so. Like, I would think if you just turn, the line would turn with you, but that's not how the spell works. So each creature that starts its turn in the line, and thankfully this says starts its turn, not ends its turn, they make a strength saving throw, and if they fail, they're pushed 15 feet away from you along the line of the spell. Also, any creature in the line gets movement halved if they're moving towards you. Spell also disperses gas or vapors and extinguishes unprotected flames in the area. I cannot say I'm a big fan of this spell. If you want to get rid of fogs or unprotected flames, go back to my first level druid spell video and check out Create or Destroy Water, which can do it with a lower level slot and without concentration. The movement penalty this creates is really circumstantial and honestly not that strong. Often a creature is going to be able to move out of the effect and then move towards you just fine. And then the pushing effect is okay, but we have lots of ways to push creatures in D&D, and most of them aren't using our concentration. And that's a big limiting factor here, because we could maybe use this in concert with other spells otherwise, but those other spells would probably use our concentration, meaning in this case we can't. So I think this is red. I don't think it's useless. It's not a useless spell, but the things it can do can be done a lot better, or cheaper, or both, by other means. Next up, Healing Spirit. This is a bonus action casting that creates an effect within 60 feet that heals a creature that starts its turn in the effect or moves into that effect for a d6 hit points, and that scales by a d6 each time we upcast it. This lasts up to 1 minute using our concentration, and we can move the effect as a bonus action on our turn up to 30 feet. And that used to be the entire spell, and it was a really good spell. In combat it was decent, but as out of combat healing it was really effective and a good deal for a second level slot. But apparently a lot of DMs hated this, right from printing. I mean, people who never saw it in play. And I really got the sense that it was banned at a lot of tables. Personally, I always thought it was a good spell, but not game breaking. I saw it in use several times, never broke my game. So your players expand a resource to heal up to full between combats. But anyways, the designers listened to the complaints and through errata nerfed this spell hard. And now I almost never see this spell anymore. So there's an additional limitation that after the spell heals a number of times equal to 1 plus your wisdom modifier, the spell ends. So we should expect a total of 4 or maybe 5 heals here. Even if we use this once per round, it's gone by the time the duration is halfway through. And that's just not enough, in my opinion. I still don't think it's a horrible spell, but it is one of the weaker healing spells now. I probably wouldn't take it myself, and I'm going to rate it red simply because you have better healing options than this, so I can't recommend it to you. If you want something like this, hold out for 3rd level spells, then you can get Aura Vitality, which will heal quadruple the hit points in a similar fashion. It's too bad, really. I think if they had just limited this to 1 healing per round, it still would have been worth the slot. But as it is now, I don't recommend it. Next up, Heat Metal. This requires an action to cast at a manufactured metal object within 60 feet, and it lasts up to 1 minute using your concentration. For the duration, the item burns red hot. Any creature touching the object takes 2d8 fire damage when you cast a spell with no saving throw. Then you can use your bonus action on following turns to repeat the damage if the creature is still in contact with the object. There is one more effect. If the object is being held or worn, a creature must make a Constitution saving throw or drop the object if it can. And if the creature doesn't drop the item, then they have disadvantage on all attack rolls and ability checks until their next turn. At which point, if we use our bonus action to inflict the damage again, once again, they either drop the item or the disadvantage persists, potentially for the duration of the spell. So this one is a bit weird because if the creature makes their saving throw, all it does for them is allow them to hold on to an object that is causing them damage and disadvantage. And those have no saving throw. I would imagine most creatures are going to want to drop the item even if they make their save. So really the saving throw is kind of meaningless. So we can use this to disarm someone pretty effectively if they have a metal weapon. But the real prize here is if they're wearing metal armor. Because if they are, then even medium armors take at least 1 minute to remove. Unless you've got something like cast-off armor, which is a magical item. And a minute is the entire duration of the spell. So the disadvantage and damage are basically unavoidable. No save, no escape. They can't even really run away because you'll just keep burning them until they're dead. When you cast this on somebody with metal armor, there's no point in them making this saving throw. Because if they fail the save, they can't drop the item, and if they make the save, they're not holding on to it. It's just there. So there's two things that need to happen for heat metal to work. First, the creature needs the metal object, preferably armor, but a nasty weapon is still a decent target here. And second, they need to not be immune to fire damage. If those two things happen, this spell is guaranteed to work, and the saving throw is likely meaningless. And fire resistance is not enough. We just need to do damage. I got a few comments in my video rating druids that this spell is the reason why druids don't wear metal armor, and for sure, you do not want to be hit with this if you're wearing metal armor. So this is a really good spell. It's obviously not going to work against a number of opponents, but the ones it does work on, it's basically about as reliable as you can get. This is a solid green as far as I'm concerned. I would actually go blue on this spell if it worked on more creatures, but that limitation bumps it down to a green, but it is still a good spell. Next up is Hold Person. This requires an action to cast, and you pick a humanoid within 60 feet. That humanoid makes a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, they are paralyzed. At the end of each of their following turns, they get an additional saving throw, and if they succeed, the spell ends. Otherwise, this could last up to 1 minute using your concentration. So first I should mention that paralyzed is an absolutely devastating condition. It is way worse than being incapacitated. It causes autofails on strength and dexterity saving throws. Creatures can get criticals every time they hit you, as long as they're within 5 feet of you, and you can't do anything. So if you are paralyzed, even for 1 round, that can be huge. But I will say this spell is not to my taste. It only works on humanoids, and the Monster Manual is full of creatures that aren't humanoids that this spell can't affect. And even if you're fighting humanoids, you pick a single creature, and if it makes its saving throw, nothing happens. Now, if you upcast this, you can target a second humanoid if they're within 30 feet of the initial target, and I will say that's a pretty good upcast. But even if a creature fails that initial saving throw, then it is getting another one at the end of its next turn. That's not necessarily a round away, because it depends on the initiative order. That might be the very next turn. And then this would just be essentially taking 1 turn away from the target, and you're not going to get to take advantage of the crits you would from paralysis. So you need a humanoid, you need them to fail their initial saving throw, and you either need them to fail their second saving throw, or have the initiative in the right order to really get a lot of advantage out of this. Now, all or nothing spells, I already mentioned, they're not my cup of tea. But even if they are for you, there are a lot of limitations here to consider. I'm ranking this orange, but only because paralysis is really nasty, and we do have pretty good upcasting here, so I'm likely not taking it on my druid personally, but if you do cast this and land this, this can end the combat. Next up is Lesser Restoration. This spell is cast on a creature you touch using your action. When you cast a spell, you can choose to remove a disease, or the blinded, deafened, paralyzed, or poisoned condition. And that's it. Pretty simple spell, and if you're casting it in combat, you will feel the loss of the action to cast this spell, but depending on what the condition is and who it's on, it really can be a lifesaver. and outside of combat for a persistent condition, this is well worth the slot. And even in combat, obviously being paralyzed is debilitating, but even being poisoned can make a big difference to someone making attacks. And if that condition is going to last even a few rounds, this is probably worth the casting. But the problem with this spell is that, obviously, it's of no use if nobody needs it. And usually, at least hopefully, they won't. Getting the poison condition is a lot more rare than just losing hit points. So this isn't going to be constantly useful like a healing spell is. But when you need this spell, it can be a really big deal. So by my definition, this is an orange spell. It's pretty circumstantial. But it is really good to have when you need it. If I had the spots on my preparation list, I would consider preparing this, but I would just have to be aware that there's a reasonable chance I won't need it. Next up, we have locate animals or plants. This can be cast using your action or as a 10-minute ritual. When you cast a spell, you pick a specific kind of beast or a plant, and then you know the direction and distance to the closest target of that type if it's within 5 miles. So let's say you're adventuring and you're wondering I wonder if there's any elm trees within 5 miles. I can get that information with this spell. And the limitation here I think is pretty obvious. How often do you need to know where a specific kind of plant or animal is? Not very often. My main challenge in rating this spell is there's probably some cases where this is useful. And this is a ritual, so you can cast it without a slot. But we're talking about preparations as well. And is this even going to be helpful enough for an orange ranking? I generally assume when I rank a spell orange that although the spell is probably too circumstantial, that circumstance is still not all that unlikely to occur. But in this case, I've decided that this circumstance is just not going to come up enough, so I'm ranking it red. Remember though, you can always prepare this after a long rest, so if you know you're going to be able to take advantage of that kind of information, then by all means, this spell does do what it says it does perfectly well. But I'm ranking it red because, in my opinion, it's not just circumstantial, but probably wildly circumstantial. Next up is locate object. This spell takes an action to cast, and you describe a name or an object you're familiar with. If that object is within 1,000 feet, you know the direction to that object, and if it's moving, you know the direction it's moving. You can also use this to detect a particular kind of object rather than a unique one. So you could maybe, search for gold pieces, for example. So this spell uses concentration and lasts up to 10 minutes. So although you don't know the distance to the object, you may be able to figure out one by employing some triangulation techniques. This can be a pretty useful spell. And I think the circumstances where you're searching for an object come up enough to justify an orange rating here. The spell does what it says as well. I just think it's more likely to come up than needing to find a larch tree. Next spell is Moonbeam. You cast this as an action, and then you create a cylinder that is 40 feet high and 10 feet diameter at a point within 120 feet of you. Any creature that starts its turn in the area or enters the area takes 2d10 radiant damage, or half that on a successful save. The spell requires your concentration, and it lasts up to 1 minute, and you can move the cylinder using your action up to 60 feet. So the action hurts, but you know what? 60 feet is a lot of movement. So you can pretty much always get this to where you want it to be if you're willing to take that action. A shape changer in the effect makes their save with disadvantage, and if they fail, in addition to the damage, they revert to their original form. And if you upcast this spell, damage increases by a d10 per level. So this is an area of effect damage spell that we can move around. The damage isn't great, and the duration is going to limit this to 1 battle. And honestly, cylinders are a shape that aren't really the best when you're playing a game that is largely played in 2 dimensions. But you know what? The damage is going to happen, either full or half. You can often get multiple creatures at a time. Radiant damage is super reliable. And this is one of those spells that you don't always need to use your action to move. There are a lot of ways to force movement, and this spell works pretty well in conjunction with force movement. There's also a lot of ways to restrict movement, and this is also a spell that works well with restricted movement. And these things really do make this spell a decent spell. It is not a dramatic spell. Unless you're going up against shape changers, then it's pretty dramatic, but most of the time it's an effect that can deliver pretty reliable damage and moderate damage. And if your party is well suited to force movement and or restrict movement, you may not need to use those follow-up actions at all. So this is purple. I think it's decent, but it's not a showstopper. But since we're on the topic of showstoppers, our next spell is Pass Without Trace. You cast this spell as an action, and it lasts up to an hour using your concentration. When you cast a spell, you can choose any number of creatures within 30 feet, and they gain a +10 bonus to stealth checks for the duration. In addition, as the name suggests, they leave no trace of their movement behind. So there's two things that make this spell really good. The first is that you can target as many creatures as you like within range, so the whole party, their pets, and of course yourself and your pet if you have one too, and maybe any friendly NPCs that are around, why not? Anybody you want in the area, no limit. The second is the bonus here is massive. This is not advantage you're getting, this is +10. That is way beyond advantage. A party with Pass Without Trace just make their stealth checks, even if they're in heavy armor, even with no proficiency, even with low dexterity. Even then, you have a decent chance to make your stealth check against a pretty large number of creatures. If your DM is employing group stealth checks, you should probably never fail, even against fairly perceptive enemies. Now, let's be honest, if this was a +10 bonus on animal handling checks or something, I'd say it's overly circumstantial. But opportunities to use stealth are fairly common, and the buff here is massive and is working on everyone. I recently posted a video on surprise, and if you have an opportunity to potentially surprise an enemy, Pass Without Trace is going to turn that opportunity into a reality. Depending on our situation, we may even be able to get surprise in multiple encounters. So if that is a possibility, then this is worth maintaining the concentration on even while you're in combat. And this is our first blue spell on our second level spell list. Next up is Protection from Poison. This is a touch spell that requires an action to cast and lasts an hour, and there's no concentration. The target gets advantage on saving throws against being poisoned and gets resistance to poison damage. In addition, if they're already poisoned, you neutralize it. Poisons are fairly common in D&D. A lot of creatures do poison damage for at least part of their damage, and saves against being poisoned aren't that rare either. Now, we're not getting immunity here, and so if your target is a dwarf or a stout halfling, this is redundant. Their racial feature does basically the same thing. But if you know you are going to be facing enemies with poison, this is actually a pretty good pre-buff. And if you don't know, but you find yourself in combat with these enemies with poison, this is a decent in-combat casting. It's still fairly circumstantial, so it is an orange spell. I'd also probably be less inclined to preparing this if I already prepared Lesser Restoration, because we do have a little bit of redundancy here. Next up is Skywrite. This spell is often called out as completely useless. In fact, it's often the example of a useless spell. I'm not sure I would go that far. You cast this as an action or as a 10-minute ritual, and for up to 1 hour, using your concentration, 10 words form in a part of the sky you can see. So I think it's pretty obvious what the use is here. This is long-range instant communication. An animal messenger takes time. This could allow for at least one-way communication over quite a large distance. Now, it's not private communication, assuming literacy, though depending on the language used, it may not be understandable to a lot of creatures. Now, would I expect to use Skywrite very often? No. Often enough for an orange rating? Honestly, probably not. I do think it's a red spell. I don't think it's utterly useless. I just think it's useful for such a small amount of the time, I can't justify an orange rating. Next up, Spike Growth. When I get to 3rd level, this is my first pick. Even before Pass Without Trace. This spell is that good. So we pick a 20-foot radius circle on the ground, so this is a big effect. Much bigger than an entangle or a web. And the area becomes difficult terrain, and a creature moving through the area takes 2d4 damage for every 5 feet it moves. Now, 2d4, it doesn't sound like a lot of damage, but this is not 2d4 total. This is 2d4 for every square it moves. And again, remember, this is a big effect, 20-foot radius. And the spikes and thorns are difficult to see, so we could do a trap-like thing here. though honestly this spell is just fine to cast right in the middle of combat, and the hidden nature of this isn't really the draw. The spell lasts up to 10 minutes using your concentration, and this spell can wreck enemies. Now this is best against groups of enemies, but let's consider a worst case scenario. We're fighting a single creature. Let's say you cast this, and now they're in the middle of the spike growth. They have to move 4 squares to get out of this. So that's going to require them 40 feet of their movement, because remember, they're moving at half rate. So it's not even like they're going to get out that easily. But even if they do, that's 8d4 damage. That's more damage than any of your other second level spells can deliver in a turn. But the real joy here is forced movement, because after Tasha's, there's so many ways that various members of your party can move around an enemy. And there's no limit to the damage on this spell, so they can take the 8d4 and dash out of the effect. Then the Swarmkeeper Ranger pushes them back in for another 6d4, and then the Mage pushes them with Telekinesis for 2d4 more, and then they're back where they started and are taking another 8d4 to escape before we do it all over again. And in this case, they've taken about 40 points of damage, and they've gotten no save. There's no save against this damage. And it's magical piercing, so it is going to work. And really, we can get a phenomenal amount of damage from this if we concentrate around it, especially if we're in the right party. Remember, we have force movement too, so things like a Thorn Whip can really come into play here. A 3rd level druid Thorn Whipping an enemy in spike growth is doing 13 or 14 points of damage at 3rd level. Consider how much damage your other cantrips are doing. In some cases, and I've seen this multiple times, groups of creatures are just massacred by this, dead before they can even escape the effect. And remember, this isn't just damage, but we're controlling the battlefield as well. Again, this area is big, and it's just not easy to get out of it if you're caught in the middle. Fast-moving melee characters can grapple opponents and then drag them across this, or mounted characters even better, and they can often do more damage with this than they would be doing with their weapons. Spike Growth isn't just the best 2nd level druid spell, it is a contender for the best 2nd level spell, period. Now, let's talk about the limitations. This isn't going to be good against flying creatures. This isn't locking down enemies completely like an Entangle can. This uses our concentration. This spell is still really great. It is a blue spell. I will say, once we get into our 3rd level spells and higher, this isn't necessarily my go-to spell anymore, but for a 2nd level slot, I don't think it's ever bad. This spell is only on the Druid and Ranger spell lists. And I mean, Nature Clerics get it, but I think we're seeing some additional redundancy with Spirit Guardians. But still, it's a pretty good spell for them as well. But for a Druid, like I said, when I get to 3rd level, this is the first spell I'm writing on my 2nd level spell list. Next up, Summon Beast. This is a 1-action cast that can last up to an hour using our concentration. When we cast a spell, we summon a beast to an unoccupied space within 90 feet. The beast takes its turn immediately after ours, and we can verbally command it, and that requires no action by us. So if we're, say, a Wildfire Druid, there's no conflict. The beast is small-sized, and we can customize it to a flying beast with flyby attack, a land beast with pack tactics, or a swimming beast with water breathing. Hit points depends on the type of beast, but we're looking at either 20 or 30, and our armor class, it's pretty weak at 13. Beast attacks for a d8 plus 6 damage, or we can have it, do something else. So I cannot get into all the uses of summoning here. I have an entire video on that if you like, but a summon spell is a lot more than a bit of extra damage each round. You can eat up enemy attacks, you can block movement, you can grapple or shove, all kinds of things, and these things combine. We're not just delivering damage, but we're also accepting enemy damage. And both those things combine to be more useful than either one of them on their own. And summoning anything this effective was just not an option before Tasha's, at least at this spell level. This spell being available to a 3rd level caster is significant, though if you do scale this spell, it does scale fairly well. It increases the creature's hit points, armor class, damage, and even number of attacks. Though this particular summoning spell I think will be most impactful right at level 3 if I'm planning to use a higher level spell slot for summoning. Because I'm a druid, I probably have better options. But you know what? 30 hit points isn't bad for 3rd level. it can probably take a few attacks from enemies, and the damage isn't bad either. And it's not using up your action or bonus action after the initial casting. And remember, we can still heal up between combats. We could potentially throw some kind of barding on it for boosting armor class, and it would benefit from temporary hit point boosts that impact the whole party. So if you have those kinds of things, don't forget to add it to your summon as well. What it comes down to is this: summoning is versatile, it's effective, and this is our first good summoning spell, and it's available to us quite early. I think this ranks blue. It's not the summoning spell of choice when we get to level 5, but at levels 3 and 4, this is a darn good spell, and no other spellcaster in the game at those levels can do this kind of thing. Finally, we have Warding Wind. This is a concentration spell with up to 10 minutes duration and requires an action to cast. When you cast a spell, wind swirls 10 feet around you for the duration, which deafens you and other creatures in the area. Yes, you are deafened by your own spell, though honestly, deafened isn't a big deal for you or for your enemies. It extinguishes unprotected flames, but as we've already gone over, we don't need a second level spell for that. It hedges out fogs and vapors, same thing. The area is difficult terrain for other creatures besides you, so that might be okay. But there is no excluding allies from this. And finally, the attack rolls of ranged weapons have disadvantage if they pass in or out of the wind. This is really the only feature here that would make me consider this spell, but even then it depends. Because this could mess up my own allies if they're using ranged weapons, and it's only of benefit if the enemies are using ranged weapons against us. So the effects here are mostly really minor or duplicated by lower level spells. The chief draw is the disadvantage on ranged attacks, which may be helpful, but I would make sure to consider whether it might cause trouble for my own ranged weapon allies. So I think this can be okay in some circumstances, and when you're a druid, defensive spells are few and far between, and this certainly beats Barkskin. Still, this isn't a strong spell. I think it could be somewhat useful in enough situations to get an orange rating. You know, if the giants start throwing stones, you will be glad to have this. And that's it. So there are a few stinkers here, but once again, we have more than enough strong options to fill up our preparations and more. Spike Growth is hard to pass up, and both Pass Without Trace and Summon Beast are great options as well. And there are a number of decent options, or circumstantial ones, to fill any holes you might have. It's also worth noting that this is the point where our druid starts their summoning journey, and they are the only class in the game with a combat summoning option at levels 3 and 4. And I think that is a hard option to ignore. So that wraps up our second level spells. Hope you'll join me next week for third level spells, where once again, Druid offers some unique and excellent options. Otherwise, until then, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody. Talk to you soon.